We need to escape, guys, tonight.
But how?
Well, the weakest point in the gulag is over there by the fourth wall.
Okay, we're gonna have to break the fourth wall. I don't think this is gonna work, guys.
No, I'm afraid you're right.
The fourth wall is, in the simplest term, an imaginary wall between the characters and the viewer. With the fourth wall in place, characters simply exist inside their world with each other. But by breaking it, they can interact with the audience themselves. The term dates back all the way to the plays of ancient Greece, and considering how often the audience can be spoken to in plays, it's likely the fourth wall was broken before the fourth wall was invented. Get your minds around that one. Now, being spoken to by the characters isn't an uncommon thing at all. I mean, just look at any show or film or game with a narrator. Especially when it comes to comedy, you'll find characters speaking to the audience over and over again. Sometimes feeling a bit like a crutch, sometimes legitimately hilarious.
Animation is so hard! People who do this for a living deserve more credit and respect!
I mean, if you want the most obvious example, Deadpool is a pop culture icon that's been practically built on chatting right through the fourth wall non-stop for decades. And I'm sure there's some darker tales with him and that knowledge, but the vast majority is simple gags. And as further proven by the likes of She-Hulk, now with her own show, and Gwenpool, straight up just a comics fan dropped into the world, the fourth wall is a perfect place for laughs. But what about the other direction? Because, let's be honest, the idea of a character knowing that they are but playthings to a higher being, just characters in a show or comic or video game, that has some real potential for horror, doesn't it? That's what the writers of Black Mirror Bandersnatch clearly knew. For those not in the loop, Bandersnatch is a surprisingly unique choose-your-own-adventure style film, where you, the viewer, get to pick what our protagonist does in his life, from the most mundane of choices to deciding whether he should commit murder or not. Now, on its own, it's a concept that's done really well, very deserving of all the buzz it got at the time, and honestly surprising there was never really any attempts of a similar concept by other studios. But that's not why we're talking about it today, because, I mean, this is Black Mirror, a series I have admittedly never watched but heard a lot about, which means things aren't so simple. In this case, is that our protagonist is aware of his lack of control. Not of us, not at first, but he knows he's being spurred to make decisions by some outside force. And it's really creepy showing him slowly start to break down no matter what path you take. But if you take the right path, well, things get just a little more meta. We can literally tell him that we are watching him from the 21st century on an entertainment device called Netflix. Now, while that is incredible, it's probably a little too goofy to be counted as horror, but that's far from our only path, and the fact that we can completely mess with this poor guy's head while he screams out to some unknown force, that being us, makes us feel so viscerally uncomfortable. It's amazing, and only possible from the excellent fourth wall breaking. Sure, it could have been just a normal experience where you can ruin this guy's life, but the addition of reaching out to you makes you that much less safe in your seat, and that feeling can really be the pinnacle of fourth wall horror. Now, this also helps prove that when it comes to shattering the fourth wall and addressing the viewer, it's best to have some sort of interactivity. That's why it's easier for video games to go about it, as we will see soon enough. But what about a TV show? Allow me to introduce WandaVision. And immediately, I know, you're gonna stop me right there, but Mag, I hear you say, that show never breaks the fourth wall, it never addresses me, the viewer. And you're right, I suppose. Let me explain. Now, the show sets itself up to be this bizarro sitcom, starring two superheroes just living an oh so abnormal suburban life. But the last time we've seen these two, they were either killed horribly or in a terrible mental state from the loss of their partner. So what on earth happened? Well, that's just what we uncovered during the events of the show, which pretty masterfully has characters just every so often in the beginning speak out of turn, or have objects or sounds that just shouldn't be there, or even the occasional quote-unquote glitch in the programming that just grabs your stomach and twists to make you queasy. It's one of my favourite things Marvel has ever done, but I do understand that it doesn't quite break the fourth wall. It acknowledges an outside audience of some kind, but never gives us, the real-life viewer, a shout-out. So how about we call this breaking the third wall? Best to give it a name, because I love it just as much. We already talked about WandaVision, which honestly does deserve its own video sometime, because in a world where the superhero genre is being more and more known for its cliché and repetitive stories, I think it's one of the most creative endeavours in the medium. But what other examples are there? Well, if we turn to games, we have an unexpected example. Five Nights at Freddy's. Specifically the VR game Help Wanted. Again, to those not in the know, Help Wanted is a virtual reality reimagining of the indie horror game Five Nights at Freddy's 1, 2 and 3 with some extras. And it is very upfront that it is a virtual reality reimagining of the indie horror games Five Nights at Freddy's 1, 2 and 3 with some extras, and you, the player, have been hired to playtest and bug test the entry. And one of these glitches? It's sentient. It's the villain from the original 3 games, don't ask, and his unsettling attitude towards you throughout the game just in the background is great, yes, and adds a brilliant spice to this already very fun collection. But it's the ending that seals the deal. There's multiple different endings, but they all result in the same outcome, so I'll focus on my favourites. That being you, the player, being trapped in this safe room with bloody handprints and claw marks all over the door, being abandoned by a glitch trap, and he then proceeds to, like every other ending of the game, take over the player's body to lead up to the next game. It's striking stuff, an unapologetically bad ending that I don't think anyone would have expected, and the direct involving of you, the player, just enhances it so much more. I tremble in both fear and excitement for what the future of fourth wall breaking in VR will look like, because there's so many directions you can go with the medium. Oh god. Then there's Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared, which, oh man, this one's really going full circle with everything from the channel so far, huh? In my opinion, has its creepiest moments of fourth wall breaking when it isn't being as overt. The bizarro horror puppet show web series turned Channel 4 show does occasionally bump at the fourth wall, but directly addressing the viewer outside of a rare gag hasn't happened quite yet. But they're still aware to some extent that they're in a fake world. I went into this in the TV series in more detail here, shameless plug, I know, but never really touched on the original web series use of it. Ranging from the characters clearly expecting something to happen as though they're on a script, to Red leaving the stage, to my personal favourite, Duck's breakdown and the subsequent blink and you'll miss it shot of the outside of the stage. I think what I love most about these little scenes is that they're never directly explained. For the most part, they're left up to the viewer's imagination, and from the years upon years of theories about the show, it's clear that it worked. Now, let's circle back round, shall we? Both in terms of talking about video games again, and also once again going back to earlier videos from this channel, let's talk about Undertale and Deltarune. Because Toby Fox's duo of games is easily the second most well-known fourth wall breaking modern game. Is it the best? Well, we'll get to its competitor in a moment, but it's up there. By this point, I don't think either of these games need much of an introduction. And I've gone in depth into Deltarune's Spamton in my first ever video, which I think holds up well enough. So for now, let's focus on Undertale, where characters seem to have varying knowledge of the fourth wall, sometimes for comedy, sometimes a shocking piece of character establishment. No! Flowey, Sans and Chris are my personal favourite examples of this from these games, with the former perhaps being the single most underrated character of the franchise, I might add. He's an excellent villain on his own, but to add in his taunting of you, the player, and you get a nigh unforgettable experience, especially if you've gone into this completely blind. It's a real shame just how incredible popularity can damage a game, because most people, myself included, will try to go for a pacifist route before anything else, which, I mean, is probably the best way to play the game, but also robs the player of the free will that can make Undertale so unique. Including this 10 out of 10 line from Flowey: "If you got this without knowing it existed, chills." In these games, you're not the player, you're a character in the story, and nobody exhibits that better than Sans and Chris. And Juora, I guess, but that's cheating because she straight up just talks to you. Besides, the other two are more interesting. Sans? Well, he's a meme for a reason. People seem to really like heavily memeing the most emotional parts of stories, go figure. In this case, the fourth wall breaking doesn't come from him explicitly speaking to you, even if that does absolutely happen, and more about the mechanics of the fight, which Undertale is not averse to doing, mind you, but not this overtly and in your face. Sans is trying to get you to reset the game, his universe, so that he can have his friends back because you murdered them all. So his goal isn't to kill you per se, it's to make the player give up. So he cheats, he stalls, he keeps you from doing anything that's magnificent. Easy enough to see why this funny little skeleton man has what is undeniably one of the most famous boss battles in modern gaming. And Chris, well, again, the Spamton video does a good job of explaining Deltarune's relation to the real world, but the idea of a main character resisting your control, and unlike Bandersnatch, he's mute. We have no idea what he thinks, what his goals are, and whether he even wants to do good or not. And I'm utterly fascinated by how this relationship will develop as Deltarune continues. Like, we still have over half the game left for this to develop. What's going to happen next? I don't know. I'm so excited. But okay, I've put it off long enough, I've stalled enough. Let's talk about... yeah, that. The 2017 psychological horror game masquerading as a dating sim. Which I'm not going to go into great detail about the horror of, because A, YouTube would have a field day with this stuff I'd be showing, and B, I'd rather not be showing my viewers this shit without any warning, thank you very much. The game stars Sayori, Natsuki, Yuri, and... oh god! Oh, right, yeah, I don't have the budget for a voice actor. Sorry, Monica. Another time, maybe. But that is indeed our focus at the moment. You can't really talk about fourth wall horror without bringing up the piano-playing poet of passion, practically the poster child for this particular path of panic, Monica. But why is that? What does this character do that makes her so synonymous with destroying that imaginary wall? Well, even the most extreme fourth wall breaks that I've gone over so far have been the characters reacting to you, the viewer or player. Doki Doki takes it a step further. In this, you're reacting to her. I admit, I was originally rather disappointed that there wasn't more than one ending. No matter what you do or who you choose to focus on, events always play out the same. No, I'm not counting the deleting Monica secrets. But it works, because it's very clear that you're not the one driving the story. She is. And in a way, I guess that's really the pinnacle of fourth wall breaking, huh? It's not about the characters breaking through to say hello to you, it's about you breaking in to say hello to them. And they really want you to stay. Thank you so much for watching to the end of this. At the time of writing, I have no idea what I'm going to be working on next, but with the release of Ruin getting closer and closer, I might have something to do. So, you know the drill, please like, subscribe, comment and share if you're able to. Every one means so much to me, really. Until next time, friends.